And today's event, I'm delighted to be handing over to SMMT's Chief Executive, Mike Hawes. Mike.
Thank you, Daisy, and good morning or good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are in the world. Welcome to SMMT's second Global Trade Conference. Now, as to the focus of this year's event, well, the clue is in the title. Automotive is a global industry, and the UK sector itself trades globally. We export to every continent bar Antarctica, and we import finished vehicles, parts and components from all around the world. That is a measure of our global competitiveness. But it is also a measure of the importance of free and fair trade. If trade is free and fair, we can compete with anyone else. If it is not, then any industry would be threatened and any market limited in choice, innovation and affordability. Our faith in our industry is justified by our record. The UK's automotive sector represents almost 1 in 8 of all British manufactured exports. Now, before the pandemic, UK automotive was a trade hub worth over £1 billion a year. COVID cut that by more than a quarter. But we are resilient and we are innovative. Last year, we recovered to £94 billion, and this year, UK trade in finished vehicles and components is set once more to exceed £100 billion. That is despite shortage in semiconductors, escalating cost of raw materials, the systemic staff shortages we face. Despite the war in Ukraine, despite inflation, and yes, despite Brexit. We must always remember that Europe is our #1 trading partner, and by some considerable distance. Over half our exports go to the rest of Europe, and 70% of the vehicles we buy come from Europe. Preserving that trade, tariff-free, quota-free, and ideally friction-free, remains the objective. The Brexit deal, the EU-UK TCA, sought to maintain a level playing field. It was an enabler. It enabled bilateral trade in electric vehicles to more than double in 3 years, from £7.4 billion in 2020 to £15.3 billion last year. But that growth is threatened if there is no change to the rules of origin requirements for batteries due to come into force in January next year. A potential tariff bill of £4.3 billion, £3.6 billion of which would be charged on imports of EU-built EVs, £700 million on the export from the UK to the EU. The price of EVs imported from the EU would go up by £3,400 for every UK customer. Our exports would become £3,600 more expensive for each and every EU customer. Unwanted, unnecessary, potentially unworkable, and illogical, as more polluting vehicles will continue to be traded tariff-free across the channel. This is just perverse. So we need pragmatism, a simple 3-year delay in the TCA origin requirements, time for gigafactories to come on stream, time for additional investment throughout the battery supply chain. Now, there is near unanimity in Europe on this issue, and we can only hope that those in isolation find agreement more splendid. Just as South Korea has done recently, looking for continuity, embracing pragmatism, extending EU accumulation and avoiding those tariffs. We need to negotiate free trade agreements with practical, realistic content requirements. No one who believes in their own abilities should fear free trade, nor fear any competitor with whom trade is fair. We are, as I said, a global industry. Interconnected supply chains, one automotive ecosystem. But markets move. China, for instance, has become the world's largest automotive market and manufacturing hub. China is also a tremendous opportunity. In the next 5 years, Chinese production is expected to increase by 3.6 million to 27.5 million vehicles. It is pivoting to become the world's largest export hub. And it is also a major investor in the UK automotive sector here in the UK. Now, some are putting up barriers. The US applies additional tariffs on Chinese-made EVs. The EU has launched an anti-subsidy investigation on Chinese EV imports. What everyone seeks is fairness. And while we are not naive to the risks for our own industry, we should avoid a trade war at all costs. Trade barriers are easy to build, but much more difficult to dismantle. So we need an open dialogue with China, one that ensures open access to the world's largest automotive market. Asia will, after all, become the dominant player in that global market. So we need more deals. With India, increased engagement to reach a commercially balanced, meaningful agreement. With South Korea, a modernised agreement. With Gulf states, a proper understanding. And with North America, build on the Atlantic Declaration to improve market access for critical minerals extracted, processed or recycled here in the UK. And as we negotiate new agreements, we must nurture our long-standing relationships with Europe, with Japan, develop and deepen those alliances that over decades have transformed our industry, driven our mutual prosperity, enabled our resilience. Standing together, facing whatever has been thrown at us, Brexit, COVID, war in Ukraine, the unforeseen, the unforeseeable, perhaps the unforgivable. Each has put barriers in the way of our industry. But those barriers we can influence, trade barriers, are the very ones we should be tearing down. The freer and fairer our trade, the more we will all prosper and the better we will meet the challenge of climate change. Protectionism won't protect the planet. Protectionism will not ensure prosperity. Free and fair trade, investment and competitiveness will achieve both. Thank you very much. Daisy.
Well, Mike, thank you very much, and so much food for thought there. And of course, over the next few hours,